Alright, let's check out some bacteria here. You might think of them as just those little things that get in the way and make you sick and stuff, but really you can think of them as doing a lot of good things too. They're really abundant. They're everywhere. Bacteria does some great things and some harmful things. And most consider them to be the first forms of life on Earth, and they're certainly the most abundant. Let's look at the numbers. There are 2.5 billion, that's 2 and then a 5 and then 8 zeros after that, in just 1 gram of garden soil. 1 gram is not that much garden soil, and that's a lot. So you might think, man, how do you pack that much in? They're really small. Here's the size of a human, and I've showed you this website before. I think I have anyway. But yeah, sure, there's a lot of things that are larger than bacteria, as you can see here. I think the largest bacteria will come into your view here. But again, that's the largest bacteria. So, I mean, much smaller than what we can see with our naked eye are most bacteria. And here's an E. coli right here, which is a form of bacteria. Sure, there's a lot of smaller things than that too, but as far as living things go, bacteria are the smallest. Here's some components of living things and then some atoms that make up everything. So yeah, things get smaller, things get much bigger, but in the whole perspective of all living things, bacteria are tiny. I'll include a link to this website in the notes to this video on the Google Doc, but if you want to check out that stuff further. Alright, this kind of gives you a look at all living things actually. It's a tree of life, a phylogenetic tree of life that kind of shows the genetic relationships with all the data and everything that's been collected as far as information for millions of different species on Earth. Bacteria is shown in blue on the left. And as you can see here, it's not like there's just 1 or 2 kinds of bacteria. And we know how abundant they are. They're everywhere. But you should also know that they're very diverse. There are many different types of bacteria in the world. Inside our bodies even, and outside our bodies, there are many different types of bacteria that are very successful. What this tree shows is kind of where bacteria diverged from the original forms of life to become, just as I say, diverse. You'll also notice that there are other organisms listed here, archaea, which we'll learn about next, and then the eukaryotes, which have like a nucleus and membrane-bound organelles, animals, plants, fungi. We'll learn about that later, but for now, just look at how much of this tree of life is dominated by bacteria. So we're going to take a look at that right now. Here's some different forms of bacteria, and really what these weird names like bacilli, cocci, and spirilli are referring to is the shape of that bacteria. Okay, some species will have a shape like this that you see. It's almost like a pill or rod-shaped organism. So some bacteria have a bacilli. If you see the word bacilli, that should mean, alright, we already know what this bacteria is going to look like, at least its shape. Same thing with cocci. If you see this word in any part of the name, like streptococcus, that's referring to the bacteria that causes strep throat. And the cocci in there, which is plural for coccus, refers to the shape being more like a sphere or a round organism. Over here, if you see spirilli in the name, it's referring to a bacteria that has a spiral shape, and you can see an example of that here. So hopefully you can get used to these terms. Some of the names of these organisms of bacteria are really difficult to pronounce, but maybe you can pick out those 3 terms pretty well. It reminds me of when I took microbiology. So in college, and there were so many different bacteria to learn and remember, but that might give us a head start. I took microbiology from a guy, the professor was great, and he was from Africa, so his accent when he pronounced some of these really weird bacteria was pretty cool. I just liked hearing him talk, like Streptococcus aureus. He probably didn't sound like that, but it's pretty close, and it was pretty fun to hear him talk. Alright, here's the structure of a bacterial cell. They are one-celled organisms, so you're never going to get a multicellular bacteria. If you do, it's not bacteria. They're all one-celled. And they have some features within that one cell that make it quite different. It's got a capsule. It's really armored well, almost like a tank. But it's got a capsule, it's got a cell wall, kind of like plants do, and it's got a plasma membrane, like every cell does, that lets things in and out that need to go in and out. It's also got ribosomes that will make proteins using the DNA that's kind of all scrambled up inside this cell. There's also plasmids, so little chunks of DNA can be within that as well. So they're pretty simple, yet they're armored pretty well. Sometimes for locomotion, they will have a flagella like this that helps it move along. Not all bacterial cells have that, and sometimes they'll have cilia that assist with that and protect the bacterial cell. So there's a look at just one of them. And as you can see, there are some things that are like eukaryotic cells. When I say eukaryotic, I'm talking about like plant and animal cells. Cells that have a nucleus and membrane-bound organelles. So there are some similarities between these cells and others. They have cytoplasm, that jelly-like substance within in the inside of the bacteria. They have a cell membrane. They have ribosomes, although they are different for making proteins. And they contain genetic information or DNA. That's what's like other cells. What's unlike plant and animal cells and other eukaryotes is that, they don't have organelles to speak of, or membrane-bound organelles like Golgi apparatus or a lysosome or endoplasmic reticulum. They don't have that stuff. Their chromosomes are structured a little bit different and circular instead of in different pieces. They don't have a nucleus to speak of. Their cell wall contains peptidoglycan, which is a protein that's really important to know as we think about how antibiotics work. And then plasmids, I talked about a capsule around the outside, and then a flagella that helps it move along. So those are things that are quite unique to bacteria. Alright, we talked about antibiotics. Here's a picture of how that works. This is penicillin, which is an antibiotic it's the oldest one there is. There are other synthetic and natural antibiotics that can kill bacteria. It works by attacking the cell wall that is made of peptidoglycan. And what happens is it ruptures that cell wall, so the contents of the cell spill out. Other things can get inside, and the cell is no longer functional. The bacteria dies. So that's how antibiotics work, both natural and synthetic, made in the lab. All right. How does a bacteria make its living? When I ask you that, I'm asking, how does it get its energy? We eat. Plants make their own energy. How do bacteria make a living? And the answer for that is in a lot of different ways. So one way that they make a living is by being phototrophs. They are phototrophic. Certain types of bacteria can make their own food using sunlight. Think plants here, and think photosynthesis. These bacteria can take in carbon dioxide and water, add a little sunlight energy, and then make their own food in the form of sugar to break down for energy through respiration later. It also gives off oxygen, so these bacteria that exist in the world That's how they make a living. Others are lithotrophic. Lithotrophs kind of act like fungi do. They decompose wastes and dead organisms to get their energy. So there are many bacteria that can do this, that serve a good purpose in breaking down dead organisms, much like fungi do. Others act like animals in the way that they can get compounds or chemical compounds from the environment and in a way eat them and break them down for energy. These are called chemotrophs because they're breaking down chemical compounds, like this bacteria that can exist in the soil because it breaks down the nitrogenous compounds in that soil environment. So some of them act like animals, some like plants, some like fungi. A couple of terms I want to point out before we go here, and also a way to point out what bacteria do. They can be good, or they can form relationships with other organisms, including ourselves, that can be good or bad. We have bacteria inside our digestive system that really help us to digest food and stay healthy, because a good mix of good bacteria is often the best form of combat for the bad bacteria. So it can be a good relationship. When it's good for both organisms, that's called mutualism. Here's another example. Some plant roots have a relationship with bacteria, and the bacteria are actually inside, and they allow the plant to get more nutrients and more water from the soil that they're both residing in. So it actually helps the plant a ton, and the plant is kind of its place to make its living. That's where it gets the stuff and exists in the place that it needs to. So in that case, it's good for the bacteria to live inside the plant, and it's good for the plant. That's a mutualistic relationship. Bacteria can be parasitic as well. So this is parasitism. Strep throat is an example of this, where it's good for the bacteria. They have a place to stay and make a living in infecting your tonsils, but it's quite bad for the human. It's bad for the host that has that strep throat. It doesn't make you feel good, and you want to get rid of it and kill that bacteria. So bacteria can be in mutualistic relationships and parasitic relationships with other organisms. Last thing, how do they reproduce? It looks pretty simple, and it is pretty simple. Basically, the DNA doubles and then the cell divides. You have identical cells that come from the original one cell, so they're no different. It's not like humans and sexual reproduction, having a baby with different genetic makeup. A lot of times these bacteria that divide pass on directly exactly their DNA, so they're exact copies. This can happen very quickly. A population of bacteria can double in as little as 10 minutes. It happens very fast. There is no male or female. The only way to get a different mix of genetics is through mutation, and the possibility of plasmids maybe involving themselves in, or passing from one bacteria to another. So that is how they reproduce, and that's all for bacteria.